time for Coffee on the Coast. Good afternoon and welcome to Coffee on the Coast. I'm your host today, Tina Prigge. Delighted to welcome back Tim Gadzinski from Manitowoc Public Library to the show. Tim, so good to see you. How's everything going?
It's going great. Great to see you too. And thank you for having me on. It's been at least 2 weeks.
That was a really long 2 weeks. I'm really glad to see you back.
Aren't you sweet?
And you've got something pretty unique and pretty special that we're going to talk about. I'm just going to put up this placard really quick so people can catch what we're talking about. You've got a program coming up called One Voice, Many Stories. And this is a first-person, First Nations oral history. And do I understand it's a 3-part series?
Yes, this is the final installment, but it's not like you have to have seen the other two to understand the gist of things, because the person who I'll be doing this show with on Facebook and YouTube, it's a live stream. His name is Napus, and he's a member of the Menominee Nation, and he's an oral historian. And much like our conversations that we have both, on Coffee on the Coast and off the air, it starts one place and immediately swirls away from where it's supposed to be going. But it's fascinating. The first installment was talking about really his family history and their connection to the boarding school program. That his mom and his dad's mom were both in the boarding schools, and we talked about that and how it finally came out in their real lives. And then talked about in the second installment how they left the Menominee area and moved to Milwaukee when his mom got remarried. And it was about how even though the boarding school program wasn't officially going, how some of the practices were still being carried out, especially by the Catholic schools, and the things that he went through and encountered. But but again, it wasn't just all about that. In the first episode, he was told a story about being bullied by someone, and his father showed him a couple of wrestling moves, and he squeezed him so hard in a leg hold till he pooped. And I'm like, that came out in the middle of but that's what is so fantastic about Napus. When we brought the Away from Home, I know, right? It's not a normal story, but all of his stories, no matter if they have a tragic beginning, they always end up with us laughing, because that's just the kind of person he is. He tries to focus on the positive, and it's just the interesting thing about the 3-episode arc was where he started and how he got to where he is today. And it's fascinating, and he always tells fun stories. And but yeah, there was the poop story. Then in the second one, he talked about how when they were in Milwaukee, and there were a lot of negative things that happened, but how he was fascinated with dinosaurs and the Natural History Museum, and he actually wound up finding fossils down by the railroad tracks in the rocks that were there that he probably, now looking back on it, could have made quite a bit of money off of, but he traded them to the museum for really super cool dinosaur models because he was way into dinosaurs. And they eventually did shut that part of the railroad down briefly to do an archaeological dig there, and they found a lot of interesting fossils. What? So I mean, so it's not all just like how hard life can be. It's about where joy occurs in life as well, even in the midst of things. Like last time he told this story about his mother going to get her license renewed at the DMV in Milwaukee. And this was in the late 60s, so it wasn't that long ago. And she was given 2 options for her ethnicity. It was either W for white or N for Negro.
Oh, and not. She's like, N is not for not.
And she's like, I am neither of those things. Right. And she wouldn't take anything else, and she kept arguing. So they finally agreed to put an R for redskin on her license. It's not that long ago.
That's living memory.
Yeah, and that's what's great about Napus. He is an amazing oral historian, and those are just touching on 3 stories.
Right.
The programs. Go ahead.
Tell us about About Napo. So he's an oral scholar and he's in residence at UWGB, right?
Correct. He has been their oral historian in residence since the First Nations Studies program started. So he's been there a long time. And you know, when I started putting when I knew for sure that the exhibit was coming to Manitowoc, the Away from Home exhibit, I wanted to get some auxiliary programming associated with it to talk about not just the history of it, but how the ripples of the history carried forward.
Yeah.
So I approached the UWGB First Nations program, and you know, you don't know what you don't know until you're told that you don't know it. You know, and so
Yeah.
with everything that I help, to set up for various things in the library, everything is so fast paced, and even like putting together great decision, helping to put that together with the committee that does it. You contact people and see if they're interested, and they'll get back to you. It's like, yes, tell me more about it, or no, I'm very busy. It's just, especially when you're dealing with academia, it's fairly cut and dry. And I sent a couple requests, and I kept waiting, and then I eventually contacted someone who I was told was the real point person. Her name is Dr. Lisa Poupart, and she's the head of kind of academic affairs and also outreach for the program. And she finally got back to me, and she's like, no one is interested because we haven't met you. We've never met you, so we don't exactly, it's like, that's not how we work. We need to know the person before we commit to it. I'm like, I am really sorry. I would not have been barraging you with emails. I just didn't know. And I was like, is it too late? Is it too late for me to, drive to Green Bay and get to talk to people? And she's like, no, I'm surprised you even brought it up. I'm like, oh, well, no. It's like, had I known what I was supposed to do, I would have done it in the first place. And the first day I went there, I met with her and Napus, and I'm a talker.
What?
You may have noticed that once or twice. I'm a talker and a cricket eater, and I not necessarily in that order. But then I met with Napus, and 3 hours later, I had maybe asked one or two questions and said next to nothing, and just listened to him, telling the stories. And then I'm like, well, can I come back and hear more stories? And he was like, sure. So he set up another meeting, and then after the second meeting, he asked specifically what I was hoping to do, and I told him. He's like, oh, sure, that's very easy, because he does an online thing called Ask the Elder. It's a course there, or yeah, it's a course, and so we just set it up, and it's just been an honor and a privilege, and just really a fascinating joy talking to him, and it's just been a lot of fun too, because
What an amazing
not too
chance the
seriously.
community has to hear these stories, firsthand. Let's tell them again. So this is going to be Tuesday, August 9th.
Yep.
It's at 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And
On
it's gonna
either
be,
Facebook or YouTube.
so live stream. So anybody can watch it.
Yep.
If they have questions, if somebody posts a question, is he answering questions in real time, or is it his presentation? Questions aren't going to be addressed.
When we headed into it, it was sort of, I thought it would be like Great Decisions, where it was kind of a presentation of what we were in theory talking about that night, and then going into the questions. Since about 10 minutes into the first program, it's, if questions come up, I integrate them right into it, because otherwise we may get so far afield from the questions or the comments that people won't remember what they're talking about. So, um, honestly, I try and integrate them as quickly as possible. Um, it's it's great history. It's great personal history. It's great history of, um, the indigenous people, that he has come into contact with, not just with his tribe, but just in general, the different First Nations people he met when he was in the army, for example. I mean, we're going to be talking about that this time, because this episode focuses on what happened after he left Milwaukee and what led him to being the person he is today. And no, I encourage people to make questions and comments throughout. And I'm not guaranteeing I can get to everything, because once we get rolling, it's just a lot of storytelling. And I'll interject an occasional question that's mine, but I try and focus on the questions and comments that come in first.
That's awesome. Okay, and the fact that it's live streamed on Facebook and YouTube, and this is part 3, does that mean that a person could go back to Facebook and YouTube and find the first 2 segments and get kind of caught up?
Yeah, you bet. Just go to the video section of our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Manitowoc Library. Go to the video section. They're right there. Um, Easy to see. The poster you put up, the poster is identical for all the programs. One just says part 1 and the other says part 2, and now we're moving into part 3. But they're real easy to find. They're just right up front in the video section.
Awesome. So this summer you had the Away from Home exhibit at the library. Is it
hmm
still up or is that finished?
It is up through next Thursday, August
Okay.
11th.
And
Through,
what did Napus think about that exhibit? Did he help you prepare that exhibit, or is that completely unrelated but just similar stories?
um, well, what Napus did ties into the exhibit. The exhibit itself is something that was put together as is. That the exhibit was by the National Endowment for the Humanities on the Road, and filtered through the Mid American Arts Alliance, and they're sort of like the agency that gets it all out. But the exhibit itself is based on a permanent exhibit at a museum called the Herd, which is in Phoenix, Arizona, and they have a permanent away from home exhibition there.
Oh, gotcha.
And this is part of this is the on the road version of that exhibition. So I told Napus what the exhibition was about, and what was contained. And honestly, when I was talking to him, I didn't know everything that was in it, and one of the things when we were talking, I'm like, well, we're setting up the exhibition now, and I came across when we were uncrating everything, were handcuffs or manacles, but for children. And that just stopped me in my tracks. And honestly, when I pass it in the library now, it still stops me in my tracks, because just to think that this existed. He goes, well, that just didn't go away when they started to shut down the boarding schools. He's like, the Catholic school I was in Milwaukee still used those. And I was like, and this is in the 60s. So, so it all ties in. And
Yeah.
and not only was it just a genuine pleasure getting to know Napus a little bit, because I feel like I'm just scratching the surface, and but the way it all ties back in, and how with everything that the rippling forward was exactly what I had hoped to encounter, but also just interestingly enough, when Wade was here, when Wade Fernandez was playing
Fernandez,
here,
yeah.
he had the concert. Um, Napus is the person who gets all his guitars ready for when he goes on tour, because Napus used to be in a bunch of bands, and he said Wade wouldn't sound nearly as good as he does if it wasn't for me tuning him. And I told Nate that, and he's like, he's just like, Napus is, he's like, that is very Napus, and he is. He's a jokester kind of guy, but yeah, no, it was something that fortunately was exactly what I was hoping, to get to provide even greater context to the exhibition.
And I love the fact that it's being recorded, right? The fact that it's streaming live means that these conversations are going to be preserved.
hmm
I'm going to put the placard back up and I'm going to read
Sure,
something from your post because I think it's really powerful.
sure.
It says, Napus will share his first person narrative with the public, focused not just on his life's journey, but also that of his family, friends, and First Nations people in general, filled with loss and discovery, sadness and joy, heartbreak and laughter. It's a tale that needs to be heard, a quest to reclaim a voice and a culture that was nearly stripped away. What an amazing opportunity you have set up for this community, Tim, to hear this First Nations story firsthand.
Oh, I feel very fortunate personally. I agree that I how many times have I said knowledge is power and knowing history is powerful stuff, but it just opened my eyes to a lot of things that I wasn't aware of, that I just wasn't aware of, and we're very fortunate that he said yes to do it. And I don't want to overuse the word privilege, but we really are privileged to have him come aboard for 6 hours. And really, he could talk for more. If we had more time allotted to it, he has stories that he could continually, one thing leads to another, and that's how we get far afield pretty fast. But he is great. He is. His stories are heartrending, and they are also just funny as all get out. And like when he told the poop story, I did not see that coming, and that was right at the end of episode 1, and I'm like, well, I guess that's a really good place to stop for the night. But and he's just laughing. He's red faced and laughing, and it's for every sad story or every one that's filled with a bit of loss, there is a really funny story that
Yeah.
seamlessly he'll go into.
So this is part 3. Have you heard feedback from the first 2 parts? Have any viewers, just kind of raved about it or said anything that you'd want to share to help other
Just
viewers make sure they tune in?
I mean, it just overwhelmingly positive things. It was things that people didn't know, that they were so happy that this was being brought to the community, and I couldn't be happier that that's the case. That people are responding that way. We haven't received really anything negative
Oh,
at
good, good.
all. I mean, it's just he tells it like it is. He's very genuine. There's not a lot of artifice about him telling stories, and and I can only imagine what his classes are like, you know, at UWGB. But he's been there since the beginning, and Dr. Poupart brought him in because he essentially adopted her, and we talked about that too. Like, I asked him, like, is it official? Is it, is there a paper? I mean, is it something that was, a legal thing? And he just described that, why would you need a paper when in the eyes of the creator, you're helping out someone who needs help? He's like, people will present themselves in their lives. And, he said, she didn't really have a positive, male influence in her life. And he stepped in, and he's like, but that's not uncommon. He's like, that's
That's
what
amazing.
we do. That's how we,
Yeah.
how we go through life. And I'm like, and I just like that, the whole thing. It doesn't matter that there's not a document. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and
Yeah. What a beautiful motivation.
yeah, yeah.
So, do you have
There's a lot of
questions
powerful
already
stuff
prepared? Are there things you're anxious to ask him for part 3?
from me.
Yeah.
I have a little foreknowledge from the time we spent together, but I'm just really gonna drop a couple and let it go where it goes. And that's why I like the audience, participation, I guess you could call it, a portion of it, because everyone can get involved in it, pretty quickly. And if you do have a question, ask it fast,
Mm.
because the topics change a lot. And I'm sure we'll talk about his a little bit about his time in Vietnam, about him coming back to the States. I've heard a couple stories about Tijuana when he was, in the service. I don't know if that's going to make its way into it or not. But then just how getting back into the whole cultural and language aspect of it, and the educational tack he took, and I'm sure some of the band stories too, because those are fascinating as well. So I don't
Yeah.
have, I would say I have more cues than questions,
Gotcha.
because I don't want to tell them exactly what to talk about
Yeah.
either.
This sounds fascinating. So this is Tuesday, August 9th, 6 p.m. It's going to be live streamed on Facebook and YouTube for the Manitowoc Public Library. This is One Voice, Many Stories. It's a first person, First Nations oral history with Napus. Tim, I'm just always so excited and inspired by the programming that Manitowoc Public Library continues to deliver up for the community. I just love the knowledge and the stimulation. It's fantastic.
Well, thanks. Honestly, it's a building full of people who like to think outside the box, because the community is evolving and the library has to evolve along with the community. So there's no one way to pass along all this cool information and all this knowledge. And it's just a privilege to work with everyone that I do, because everyone is just like, coming up with new ideas and throwing things around. And now we even have a new director coming in. So,
You do tell the world. Can you tell the
oh,
world?
I can tell the world because it was announced yesterday, and it's so new. And I just got back to the library from being away. I can tell you that her first name is Karen, spelled. It looks like Karen, but it's Karen. She is currently the executive director for the Marinette system of libraries, and will be coming here. Her first day is September 19th. She needs to take care of some things up there first,
Well,
and
how
that's what I know. So
exciting.
yesterday
We
that
probably
happened.
should have started with this breaking news that the Manitowoc Public Library has selected a new director, and her name is Karen, and we'll learn more about her in September.
But honestly, that would have been all the breaking news I could have given you. I'm not holding back any secret knowledge. I am just, honestly, that is all I know. You know everything I know at this point, because I've been trying to get caught up on emails. That's why I was away for a while. But
Tim, thanks so much for joining us today. This has
well,
been,
thank you for
as
having me. It's
always, a
always a
fascinating
fun time.
conversation. I'm already looking forward to the next time you book yourself, and let's make sure that we get the new director on when she's got some time in the future too.
What? I'd never thought of that. That is such a good idea.
I don't want to tell you how to do your job.
No, I will definitely get her on, because I really, she sounds fantastic. She sounds like she is very much in line with, well, what you mentioned, bringing new things to the community, and doing it outside the box, and always trying to, provide something that's fresh and fantastic. So, I can't wait to get her out there. She doesn't know that I'm lying in wait, but I am. So I definitely will get her on as soon as possible.
Super. All right. Thanks, everybody. Tim, thanks for joining us, and thanks for watching Coffee on the Coast. We'll see you next time.
Bye.